Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the drop-in dungeon Cult of Abyssal Summoning, designed by Lliam Sedawie for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/RogueWatson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Manuel, Basil, Huskarl124, Wizard Princess, my favorite D&D player, and Christopher. And gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Nima, Marcos Dade Vicente, Gilberto, Sean A.K., Cert to be Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Arash, Limpy Spuds, Jerome, Fatboy619, Skalenia, Nick. Thank you all very much for your support. Cult of Abyssal Summoning is a lair dungeon. The entire thing takes place in a single dungeon for 2nd to 3rd level characters, and it has a lot of problems. What I like about this dungeon is the design of it, which is a pretty good thumbs up. It is a cave dungeon full of bandits and cultists, which is unfortunately extremely generic, and the lack of story doesn't help it there. But the actual construction I'm a fan of. It's a pretty good sized cave complex, and it's got branching paths, which I appreciate. There's some locked doors. There's a really fun kind of bridge trap that can drop players into the prison area that the townsfolk are being kept in. There's opportunities for the players to role play and talk to some of the bandits, because apparently they don't exactly have like a list of who's a bandit, and people are just coming and going, so it's pretty easy to just dupe your way into this complex. And it's got a pretty decent final boss encounter with a demon summoning lady. The problems are that it's, aside from being kind of hopelessly generically themed with a bunch of bandits and cultists, there's no real story surrounding this entire dungeon. And I get wanting to do a drop-in dungeon as you want to make it as moldable as possible and easily adaptable to your campaign, but that's no excuse not to include any kind of a story. Really, the only setup we get is, which, and I've said this before, please include your cover page in the actual final PDF product. I've seen that too many times. It looks bad, and you know, make a good cover. People will absolutely judge your product on your cover, and include that here, because it just looks weird not to have one. The only story bit we get is this little bit in the yellow text here, which involves it's a leader of a sorcerer cult is capturing people and somehow using them as sacrifices to summon demons, and she's hired a bunch of bandits to kind of guard the area. And that is, I mean, it's like a writing prompt, basically. It's not really a full-fledged story here. And the plot hooks, which are very easy to miss because they're included here on the same page at the bottom, literally include a group of bandits is terrorizing the town. People have gone missing. It's just the most generic situation you could hope for. And it doesn't help that these characters are not very fully fleshed out. The few ones that you get to interact with, there's the leader of the bandits who is guarding the final door into the boss room, can be talked to, and there's a few notes on how to roleplay them. I appreciate there's journals you can find that help kind of expand on that. I'm not a fan that this guy is supposed to be, what does it say, a smart man who doesn't have the words to express himself, so I don't know how even to roleplay this character. There's not really a lot of good notes here, other than he doesn't really speak very well, and I don't know if it's supposed to be for laughs or not. It was hard to get the tone, too, because at one point you meet where the actual cultists are kept, and it mentions you're supposed to figure out that one of the cultists is pregnant, and it says, it's always a nice shock to the party when you humanize the enemy. Yeah, but you can't just, you have to go a little further than that and assume that the players are going to want to have like a social role-playing situation here and not just have that be an after-the-fact thing, like, oh, what are you going to do now? Like, well, make that part of the story then. And same thing with the final boss. Ashala doesn't have very good, there's no, villainous monologue, for example, or any kind of story system going on here. It is very much just you get that initial prompt, you go room to room, and you can do some fun things within there. Like I said, there are some opportunities to role play. There's the quartermaster you can kind of chat with. You can disguise your way in, and it doesn't even really need deception checks until you actually get to the boss, because everybody just assumes, assuming you're wearing like the bandit gear, you can waltz your way in. But there's a huge lack of story structure to this entire dungeon that I found extremely lacking, on top of some problems. Well, I like the dungeon design. There's no color here at all, and it actually is detailed pretty well. You can see little crates and tables and bridges. I like the look of it, and we do get separate player maps and DM maps, so all of that is provided, but there's no color here at all. That really sucks. If we had gone just a little bit further with providing an awesome map, that honestly would have made up for a lot of the dungeon's shortcomings, which is that it's generic bandits and cultists, and there's no real story, and that the characters aren't very well realized, which is a lot of negatives. But if you give me a good map, that's something I can work with. The other issue is this adventure is in desperate need of an editor. There's a lot of parts of the descriptions and flavor text that are way too wordy and written in a casual blog style, and I will raise my hand as being absolutely guilty of doing that many times over. But I'm not publishing things on the DM's Guild also, and I need an extra layer of professionalism with the writing, or I'm gonna call you out on that. Not if there's occasional typos or stuff here and there. We're all human. I totally get that. But if I'm reading the whole thing and I'm immediately have my editor glasses on and I start red marking in my mind, that's going to be a problem. I'll give you some examples. It says under the very entrance, there are two ways that you can run the entrance of the cave. The first is to have the PCs come across the cave when the bandits are unloading supplies into the cave. If you do this, then if someone has a perception of 10+, then they can see 8 unique bandit faces walking in and out of the cave unloading supplies. You can cut out like a third of the words in those two sentences for the exact same thing. Another example is, yes, I did write this down, the description of Ishala's room. The interior of this room has been decorated so that the gray stone cave walls that you have become used to seeing are covered up with blue and red linen cloth that line the walls. There are rugs on top of rugs that cover most of the floor. Ugh, that's not good. And what it does, it just requires somebody else to give it a once-over and clean that up, because I get what you're trying to say. You can just say that in a much better way, to not have so many words and such an awkward sentence structure to have to read that. And that is a problem. If I see that repeated throughout an adventure, even a small one as this, then that is going to be a problem. But I mean, it's got some good stuff going for it. I think the final boss fight is fun. Even though we don't really know anything about this lady who's summoning I was also confused about the demon summoning situation, because we're capturing townsfolk, and then in the journal you find from the bandit leader, it mentions that she captured somebody and transformed them into like a half demon person, which is interesting. And then you get to the final boss fight, and she has to summon a demon, and she summons that half person demon. So I was really confused about, wait, why are we summoning? If you took a townsfolk and transformed them into a half demon, why is that thing not just hanging around somewhere? Why do you have to resummon? So that part's very confusing about what. And again, this could all be solved if there was more information about the actual story and motivation and things going on with the villains. And I get that this is just a single dungeon. We're not making a full-on. We're not even making a mini adventure. It's just a drop-in dungeon. But that is no excuse not to have some kind of story structure here. Like every dungeon, if you're wanting to make it interesting, is create with villains, especially ones that these are not just monsters, these are people, cultists and bandits that you can talk to, and you can, presumably talk to any of them. Especially, I would imagine you want to talk to the named NPCs that are the bosses. And you really don't know anything about what's going on or what their motivations are, besides just a generic, just doing it to be evil and trying to take over the world. It's very, very lacking. I appreciate the unique stat blocks, and the actual combat boss fight seems interesting, because she's on this stone structure in the middle of the room. There's lava. There's pools of lava around the area. She can summon some wolves, which is good, because you never want to have enemy boss by themselves, even if they've got legendary actions or something. I think minions are very important, so she can summon wolves. Although I think she spends her first action summoning up that half arm. There's a picture. Yeah, there we go. That half demon thing. And then she can eventually use her legendary action to make the lavas rise. And it's really funny that the head bandit boss, if the player somehow tricked their way past him, he obviously comes back into the final boss fight, which is a bad situation for the players to be in. But one of his abilities is to kick, and near him there's a wall of spikes. He can kick players into the spikes, and then obviously when the pools of lava, he can use his kick attack to kick people into the lava. So I just thought that was funny. So I appreciate that there was at least a multiple step boss fight here, an attempt to make somebody with like legendary actions and environmental hazards and things going on, even for as low of a level as this is, which is 2nd to 3rd level, which you don't expect these big fancy legendary action boss fights in. So I thought that part, the combat part of it, was fine. I just the story part was just very, very lacking and disappointing overall. And that's pretty much it. I mean, it's very, very short. The ending is like, hey, if your PCs can save the prisoners in the bottom, which is interesting. That I appreciate a dungeon that branches off and allows some non-linear exploration. In this case, I would assume 90% of the time players, even if they complete the quest of saving the townsfolk, they're still going to want to actually go fight the final boss. In this case, they technically don't have to. You can actually go down to the lower level of the cave and save the prisoners. My favorite bit is if the players trigger the bridge trap, which is if more than one crosses the bridge, it falls into this river, and then that PC is then carried into the prison room, and they become trapped with the prisoners, and then you've got a split party situation. That's really cool if you can pull that off. And that can lead to some really fun shenanigans, and it even mentions in the text, like a player could, distract the prisoner while the rest of them try to come down and deal with them because there's only one guard there at the time. And you can free the prisoners and then just skedaddle it out of there, hopefully without sounding the alarm or anything. But even if you do, the head boss still just guards the final boss room, and then she's just in there chilling. So there's no, I don't know, I think there could have been something better with maybe one of the townsfolk is like, hey, there's somebody has been, was just dragged off recently. They're going to get transformed into a demon, or half transformed and then banished and then summoned. Again, I'm confused about how that works, but there's things you could have done to make this a little bit better. Obviously, just expanding on the story, way better motivation and backgrounds on the NPCs. All of that would have helped immensely. Having color on this map would have helped immensely. Having a cleaned up text and made it easier to read and parse would have been a big improvement. These are all things that would have made Cult of Abyssal Summoning a much better drop-in dungeon. Let's go over my pros and cons. Pros, it's a solid dungeon design. Like, honestly, even though, well, without going to the cons, I do think I like the map. I like the design of it, which is I like the branching paths. I like the path down to the prisoners. I like that it's got bandits on one area, cultists on the other. The quartermaster you can talk to. There's journals to find from the enemies. The final boss fights, I think, well designed. So I think those are all pluses. I just included as a single pro. It's just the dungeon design is solid, which is good because that is the whole thing is just the dungeon. Cons, the dungeon lacks story structure. I'm just kind of including all of that in terms of the NPCs don't have enough information. The actual plot hooks are laughably bare. Like, there's just not enough there. Cons, the awkward, wordy sentence structure is in desperate need of an editor. And the other con is that the map lacks color. If this map had just, and I love, if this exact map had just been given some color, it would be absolutely perfect to drop into a VTT and away you go. And we do get the separate player and DM maps, which are awesome. So I think that's just, it's a bummer that we didn't get that, because a really good map, in my mind, can honestly make up for a lot of these shortcomings. Unfortunately, in my case, it would be using the map and then having to rewrite a lot of the actual dungeon itself. Final verdict, minimizing the story and characters exacerbates the generic bandit cultist cave dungeon in the Cult of Abyssal Summoning. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. And you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.